tribe has spoken.
Okay, JLP, you'll have these moments in the video. Just wait for a sec. Okay, what's up, everybody? This is Willie, and today I'm going to cover Australian Survivor Brains for Brawn 2 because the season had just wrapped up, and now I can get right into reviewing the story of the season, giving my thoughts at the end, then doing some special semi-ranking where I'm going to label who I think is the best and worst player of the season. And then lastly, I'll compare how this season played out to my preseason predictions. So these are all going to be something interesting to cover on. So let's start off with me reviewing the story of the season, narrating how it occurred each episode. Let's get into it. Season starts off with 24 brand new players divided into two opposing sides in Brain and Brawn, where they do first start off with their marooning challenge, where Max on the Brains tribe makes one fatal mistake that would cost his team to win, as it gave room for the Brawn tribe to catch up and win the reward. So the Brawn tribe settled themselves at their camp, and within 5 minutes into the game, Nash finds an idol, and Zen happens to be passing by, so he publicly shares it with him first, before publishing his idol find to the whole tribe by wearing it around his neck, which that alone put a big bullseye on his back. Then with the Brains, the women seem to want to work with each other, which led by Laura and Logan, they gather some of the women together to start a female alliance. Meanwhile, Max is obviously in shame for costing the tribe's reward, which everyone seems to be very forgiving of him, besides Kent, who is very appalled by Max's impulsive missteps during the challenge. So that night, as everyone sleeps, he snatches Max's hat and throws it into the fire, burning it, which was such a villainous act. Where furthermore, the next morning when Max discovers the absence of his hat, Ken is able to cover himself and try to pin Miles as the culprit. Considering the players were already skeptical of him, it will keep him on everyone's radars. So then on to the first immunity challenge, Nash shows off his idol necklace to the Brains tribe, which that alone impresses them. And then the tribes compete in the immunity challenge where Nash and Noonan fumble on the puzzle for the bronze and lose it for them, mainly due to Nash. And with that, the Brawn tribe is headed to tribal first. So afterwards, they head back to camp, and the consensus seemed that it's going to be voting Nash simply because he's in possession of an idol. But because he has an idol, it's always best to split the votes, and so they decide they're going to split some of their votes onto Nash's ally, Ursula, who does get wind of it and retells Nash about it, who himself doesn't want her to be collateral damage of his potential idol play. So Nash pushes for his preferred vote, which is to take out Candy, who is the only person on the tribe that he does not have some connection to. So he goes on to rally the votes against her, and some of the people he told would retell this to Candy, making her fully aware that she is on his firing line. And the scramble goes pretty much back and forth between the equation of Ursula, Nash, and Candy. So the Brawn tribe go to their first tribal council, and Nash seems to still contemplate on whether he will use his idol or not, when it's like, obviously you should use it when you blatantly have it around your neck. And so the tribe goes to vote, and Nash does indeed go through with playing his idol on himself, negating 3 votes casted against him, which one of them comes from his ally Zen. And then it's a close 4-4 vote between Ursula and Candy, and then the final vote ends up being casted against Candy, sending her home first on Brains vs. Brawn 2. After the tribal council, in the next morning, Zen decides to open up to Nash about his flip on him in the previous tribal, which Nash really isn't happy about, while Zen just continues to give him what he wants to hear. Meanwhile, with the Brains, majority of the girls has came together for an all-female alliance known as the Coven, and the Coven has tried to form a bond with the last girl left in Indy, who is not really feeling compelled to work with the alliance. Then the tribes face off in a reward challenge where Nash will be the biggest detriment for the Brawn tribe when he fumbles terribly at the sandbag tossing, while the Brains just have a smooth victory and win the reward. So after the reward victory, the Covenant Alliance assemble together to discuss their plans, and although Miles is a huge target on the tribe, they want to go for a much bigger player as their target, which is Rich, who they describe as the glue guy who's keeping the boys together. And so that night, they decide to rally in Indy as a number, which would be the defining moment of how Indy's game would play out. And you'll learn why, as the tribes face off in their next immunity challenge, and this time, the Brawn would be victorious, sending Brains to their first tribal council. So at camp, the consensus target is on Miles, because the tribe somehow just don't really trust him, and especially with Kent being the most influential in persuading the tribe to vote against Miles. Meanwhile, the Coven girls plus Indy gathered together to solidify the vote against Rich, but Indy doesn't feel as committed to the alliance considering she was pulled in last, which is understandable from her end, meaning that she's probably not the biggest priority to the alliance. However, she is the most insulated at this point, so why not just commit to it as you can, especially coming into your first tribal council, like seriously. But that's not all, as Lauren as well as Logan also don't agree on Rich being the Coven's target, considering Laura looks at him as a worthy asset to keep around and would prefer the Coven girls to stick with the majority plan of getting rid of Miles. Back with the storyline with Indy, feeling like she was not the most important to the Coven's alliance, she would talk to Max and Rich and out the alliance's plan to take out Rich. In addition to that, using an unnecessary assertive approach that would rub Rich and Max the wrong way, perplexing Rich to not even take her word for it, and he would retell the girls about Indy's essential betrayal, which now has made them, plus most of the tribe, to flip against Indy. So at Tribal, a lot of the events leading up to it is summarized there, where most of the tribe mates blatantly exposed Indy's choice of betrayal, which was definitely much to her predicament, and then, on top of the exposure, Ken would unthinkably out himself as the culprit of burning Max's personal favorite hat, which mostly bewildered his fellow tribe members. But anyways, after they vote, Indy is voted out near unanimously, just with her and Kent being the only ones to vote against Miles. The following day, the Coven girls realize that they are outnumbered, so thanks a lot to Kent exposing himself at the previous tribal, they weaponize his menacing act as a target to put on his back, and especially as a way for retribution for his heinous choice of torching Max's hat. Then, AJ's presence emerges, where he's made such observations around the tribe and recognizes the dynamics that is occurring, where he's examined that the ladies have a such tight bond together. So, in a way to counteract it, he tries to rally the boys together to stick true so they could keep the girls in the minority. Then we get to the reward challenge, where the two tribes face off in duels where things get very physical, which was pretty much highly favored for the Brawn tribe, and they do win, which also resulted in Zen injuring one of his fingers, which he does acknowledge in confessional. So the Brawn tribe go and enjoy their reward of loaded fries, and then suddenly Polly finds a clue on his napkin, which is an image of the location where the idol is hidden at, and he finds it without getting caught. But he does confide in Noonan about it, so she's aware that he has an idol. Then it's time for the next immunity challenge, which noticeably the Brawn is down a number, and that absent person is Zen, who returns from medical attention, and he reveals that he unfortunately has to be pulled from the game because of his injured finger, which really does suck for a player like Zen, who was very well positioned on his tribe. So that Zen is out, and then the tribes compete in their next immunity challenge, where despite Brawn losing its number, they're able to avoid another loss by winning immunity, so that brings us Zen to their second tribal council. So at camp, the consensus vote is on Kent, who himself is very delulu to the fact that he's on the chopping block, assuming he's got power that is influencing his tribe mates to vote for his rival in Miles, which the tribe do agree to have this vote split it on in the case Kent plays an idol, which at this point, why didn't he even go look for one to begin with? But anyways, we return to AJ's storyline, where he expresses his annoyance that the tribe is enabling the Girls' Alliance to gain full power, so he wants to try and make a move against one of them, and he plans for his target to be Logan, who he believes is the central figure of the alliance, and so he believes he can get the boys on board and just needs one of the Coven girls to flip. So he tries to work on it with Allie, who he tries to put some trust in and doesn't tell her initially about the plan he was stirring up, so Allie retells this to the Coven Alliance, predicting that AJ is stirring up a plan to blindside Rich and wants the Coven girls to pivot back to the Rich vote. However, Laura still disapproves of this and continues to preach for Rich's safety in the game. So then AJ talks with Allie again, and this time he finally spills out his plan to blindside Logan, but Allie is not committed to the plan, meaning AJ has no choice but to back out too and stick back to the Kent vote, much to his disappointment. But to add on top of that, Allie is also not solid with him and retells his scheme to the Coven Alliance, which now they want to target AJ instead of Kent. So then they go to Tribal, where although the Covenant girls really wanted to get AJ for his attempted move, they ultimately stuck with the consensus choice of getting rid of Kent, and he is the third person to be voted out. The next morning, the Coven's Alliance debate between AJ or Rich as their next vote. Meanwhile with AJ, he's recognized his game was torched after his attempted move at Logan failed. So he chooses to play a little devilish and inform Rich about the girls coming after him, which now ignited him to turn against them, especially Logan, who he labels as his prime target. On Brawn, everything mostly focused on Nash, who is just shattered to lose his friend Zen and also still remain on a vulnerable position in this tribe, where even his supposed allies in PD, Kristen, and Ursula aren't apt to keep him around any longer. Then we get the reward challenge, where it's all about endurance, and surprisingly, Logan and Zara from the Brains tribe hang on the long list and win the reward for the Brains, so they return to camp to enjoy their sausage shizzle reward, and Rich takes the opportunity to gather all the boys together and form an alliance with them, naming it the Bomb Squad so they could dismantle the Girls' Alliance. Over at Brawn, Nash is the central story maker again, where he drops a bombshell on his alliance members that he threw the first immunity challenge when he failed at the puzzle, which his intention was to test the dynamics of the tribe, which his alliance members aren't too happy with him. So then immunity challenge, and Miles single-handedly wins the challenge for the Brains, sending Brawn to their second tribal council. So they head back to camp, and Nash is everyone's target besides Nash himself, who tries to rally his alliance together so he could target someone like Morgan. However, nobody is willing to go along with his plan, and while he's out trying to scramble for some numbers, the majority makes an agreement to split some votes onto Ursula in case Nash plays an idol. So then at a last-ditch effort, Nash pretends he finds an idol by using the previous idol parchment to show off his supposed idol to the tribe. But that idea didn't seem to work, especially when Nash doesn't have an actual idol to show off it. So with that, the Brawn goes to tribal council, and people do get confrontational there, where they really castigate him for his antics, where he essentially endangered his allies and put them at risk of elimination. And for some reason, the majority tribe blatantly saying that the vote is going to be split between Nash and Ursula, which Nash then urges everyone to vote against him, which people thought was a bait, but nope, as the votes were cast, Nash was near unanimously voted out. And then the following day, Ursula is clearly the next person on the outs on the Brawn tribe, and she has an awkward confrontation with Noonan, whom she don't trust, and vice versa. Then on Brains, Allie and AJ have been pretty distant with each other ever since the Logan move the latter wanted to make, so they try to have a little discussion, but AJ just doesn't have any trust with her, and he hopes for her to be the Bomb Squad's main target if they ever go to tribal again. Then it's time for reward, where Brawn wins, and they get a special case where they can invite one of the Brains members to come along with them, and they choose Allie. And when she goes on a war with them, she pretty much spills out everything about the dynamics on her tribe, which that's very sloppy play, and just allows the Brawn tribe to keep informed of the Brain tribe dynamics, which could be weaponized against them down the road. So then at Brains, AJ finds an hidden immunity idol. Then we get to the immunity challenge, where the Brawn tribe just sustains a huge lead and win, sending Brains to tribal council. So the Brains go back to camp, and the Bomb Squad faction unite and plan to take the reins for the vote and blindside Allie. Meanwhile, the Coven are debated between Rich and Allie, where once again, Laura continues to vouch for Rich, which is setting some cracks within the Coven alliance. Then we see Allie continue to dig her grave, first seeing her awkward conversation with AJ, where their game talk is going nowhere and is making him feel more incensed to take her out. And then she talks to the Coven alliance and straight up tells them that she exposed a lot of the tribe dynamics to the Brawn tribe, which has significantly demolished her alliance's trust with her. And this greenlit Laura an opportunity to save Rich by just signing with the men to get rid of Allie. So then they go to tribal council, where they do their usual game talk with JLP. However, a twist is revealed that no one is going to go home. Instead, the person with the highest amount of votes will be swapped over to the Brawn tribe permanently and be given a scroll, which the information is obscured from the tribe until the swap person gets possession of it, and then they can read the details of it. So now the tribe is informed of the twist ahead of the vote. Players like Rich, AJ, and Allie volunteered themselves to go to the Brawn tribe, and so by the end of it, in favor of Laura in keeping Rich safe, the entire tribe voted Rich to go to the Brawn tribe, and he now gets possession of a scroll, which is revealed to be an advantage where the holder can send two people back to camp at tribal where they cannot be voted for but also can't vote. And this advantage is automatically used in the next round no matter which tribe goes to tribal. The following morning, Rich wakes up at the Brawn tribe, where he settles himself among the tribe dynamics, trying to socialize with everyone. But he shows to be delusional, as he just served himself on a platter in the case they go to tribal again. On Brains, Laura and Logan officially choose to bail on the Coven Alliance because they're unable to work with allies who disagree with their perspectives, especially Zara. So they try to form a new alliance with Max and Kaylin, and they make the plan for the four of them to go after AJ because obviously Logan has the vendetta against him. Then the tribes face off in another reward challenge where it's another duel, where notably we have this face off between Ursula and Karen where they just couldn't knock each other off of the platform and they continued fighting for 20 plus minutes, which wow, and that's when JLB had to call it off and make it a draw. But anyways, Brawn win reward and they head back to camp to enjoy it along with some love letters. How great. Then back on Brains, we're shown Miles and AJ's strong bond and each plan to rope in Kaylin as another number. So Miles approaches him and the two of them have a decent game chat where Miles brings up targeting Max, but what he doesn't know is that Allie was passing by and overheard his conversation with Kaylin, and because she's close to Max, she runs straight back to him and reports Miles to him. So now Max wants Miles gone. Then it's time for immunity, where the Brawn tribe win again. And because Rich is on that tribe, he has to give his scroll to a member of the Brains tribe, and he openly gives it to Max, which everyone catches. So the Brains head back to camp, and Max reads the scroll in front of everyone, where it reveals the details of the advantage that he can choose 2 people to send back from tribal. And he openly says his plan out, which now has shifted some things, especially from Miles' side, who was planning to target Max. So Miles and AJ, who also gather in Zara and Karen, they form an alliance called the Graduates, and this time they're going to go after Allie because she is a liability with trust. Meanwhile, on Max's side of things, where his group is initially going to plan to target Miles, but then Laura and Logan suggest they go after Zara so that it could show that the Coven's alliance has been dismantled. But things do take a turn because Max is continuing to change his mind on who he's going to send back from Tribal, which begins to mess up his alliance's plans. So the Brains go to Tribal, and Max uses his advantage to send back Laura and Karen, which was very jarring. And then when they go to vote, it is a close vote between Allie and Miles, where the one deciding vote sends home Allie, which shocks Max's side of things. Then afterwards, the tribe return to camp and are mostly confused by the events, where notably, Zara is able to not blow her Graduates Alliance cover, which her alliance phrases her for. Then it's time for a reward, and before they can compete, it's time for a tribe swap. And so the players get new buffs and they head over to their new tribes. And we see here the massive dichotomy between these two tribes in terms of their dynamics, where the new Brains tribe comprises 4 original Brains and 5 Brawn, while the new Brawn tribe comprises 5 original Brains and 4 Brawn. So now after that, they compete in a reward challenge and the new Brawn win reward. So Brawn 2.0 settled themselves, and the 4 original Brawn recognized there could be tribal lines in play, and their side themselves are a complex group to work together considering Noonan and Ursula's vendetta towards each other. But despite that, they're trying to see cracks within the Brain grouping. While on Brain 2.0, it is, like I said, a complete contrast to Brawn 2.0 because this time the original Brains are on the outs. However, one of them and Max are able to find an immunity idol. And so then they compete in immunity and Brawn 2.0 ends up losing, so they go to Tribal Council. Brawn 2.0 head back to camp where the X-Brains concept their plan to vote for Noonan, and they're putting in faith that Rich will be on their side on the vote. Meanwhile, with the X-Brawn, they struggle to even unite because of Noonan's tiff with Ursula. But they try to discuss a plan to target Logan. And they try pulling in Rich as their 5th, and he is down for it. But he also informs AJ about it, who is open to his flipping, but does not plan to execute it with him. And they do get into a somewhat awkward debate that didn't seem anything of substance at first, but oh was I wrong. As the scramble continues, Ursula now feels incensed to flip on the Brawn because of her disliking of Noonan, and she straight up tells it to her face. Which when AJ learns about this, it encapsulates to him that the X-Brawn are nowhere united as a 4, so he goes ahead and spills out Rich's potential flip to Karen, and now they push the votes to be flipped on Rich, uniting the X-Brains with some of the X-Brawn, excluding Ursula because obviously, and now their plan is to go for Rich. So the tribe goes to Tribal, and by a near unanimous vote, Rich is the one blindsided. Afterwards, we cut to the Brain 2.0 camp, where Miles is trying to create bonds with the Brawns by having some game talk with them, much to the predicament of his fellow Brains. On Brawn 2.0, AJ is holding the most weight on the tribe, having positioned himself with such power over the dynamics of the tribe. Then another immunity challenge commences and Brawn 2.0 loses again. So they go back to camp, where the X-Brains are resolute in splitting up Noonan and Polly with their plan to vote Polly out. However, AJ has some protest against it because he wants to use Polly in part of his hostage plan, which I'll get to explaining soon. But his whole idea is to push for the votes to flip on Ursula since she doesn't seem suited for his sort of hostage plan. So then explaining what AJ's hostage plan is, essentially using the leftover ex-Brawn members as hostages to their supposed Brawn allies on the Brawn 2.0 tribe as a way to entice them to throw the immunity challenge, which the idea from AJ is all just sloppy and feels so abnormal. But back to the scrambling, Ursula now seems to be the primary target, and she continues to dig her grave, which she attempts to throw out Karin's name as a vote to the ex-Brawn, but they straight up throw her under the bus to Karin herself and the rest of the brains, diminishing anyone's trust with Ursula moving forward. And at Tribal, Ursula becomes another near unanimous casualty who has now been sent home. And now with Ursula gone, AJ fulfills his move, but his fellow brains are not keen on his hostage idea, especially Logan, who looks at it as an endangerment to her ally Laura on the other tribe. Then on Brawn 2.0, we continue to highlight the Miles and Max rivalry, where the 4 X-Brawn, especially the 2 of them, are hanging on by a thread. Then the tribes compete in immunity, where during one of the puzzles, it outright shares a clue about an idol hidden in the challenge, and everyone goes digging for it. Kristen finds the idol for the Brawn 2.0, while Miles finds it for Brawn 2.0. And afterwards, Brawn 2.0 finally loses the challenge, which could have been factored by AJ's hostage plan to throw it. But anyways, they head back to camp, and now that Miles, the main target, is in possession of an idol, it throws a wrench in the majority's plans, where the ex-Brawn concept the idea to counter Miles' idol play by voting out his rival Max. Which, don't forget, Max has one too, but he has less knowledge about his position compared to Miles. Meanwhile, the X-Brains finally try to work together, and they're gonna go after Kate. But then things take a turn when Zara says some things that rub Max the wrong way, so now he confides in the ex-Brawn to work with them on the vote, not knowing that they're gonna vote him out. And the ex-Brawn tell him a plan that they're gonna split votes between Miles and Zara. In case Miles plays an idol, Zara goes home. Max pulls in Laura on this plan, and she decides to straight up tell Zara that she's the split vote target, which now shifts a lot of things, where now they think that they might have to vote out Miles, but convince him to play the idol for Zara. So after this wild scramble, they finally go to Tribal Council, and Miles plays his idol on himself, and he successfully nullifies 4 votes against him. He still votes for Kate, however, the X-Brawn stuck true to their plan and blindsided Max, unknowingly having him leave with an idol in his pocket. With Max gone now, the OG Brains still remain on the bottom of the tribe, with Miles putting in desperation to try and bond with the X-Brawn. Meanwhile, on Brawn 2.0, AJ is trying to sugarcoat each of the ex-Brawn members to make them feel assured by him, and even being able to turn them against one another as well. Then we go to reward, and Brawn 2.0 wins the reward. They head off to enjoy the feast, and meanwhile, Miles is trying to re-ingratiate with the majority, but his fellow brains are disapproving his tactics, and they confront him at night about his motives. And the Brawn themselves still plan to knock out the brains anytime they lose. So then it's the immunity challenge, where at the final part, both representatives in Ben and AJ blatantly try to throw the challenge for their respective tribes to lose. But by the end of it, AJ was the one that lost it for the tribe, and the Brawn 2.0 lose once again. So immediately when they return to camp, an exasperated Noonan starts exposing AJ and spills out everything he has said to her about his fellow tribe mates. And Logan in particular took it very seriously after learning what AJ has said about her. But really, it still went to nowhere, as the X-Brawn were still gonna stick together, and they decide to target Polly. And then the aforementioned himself butts into the group conversation, and they lie to him that he's actually the minority split, telling him that Noonan is the target, which obviously does not make anything better for Polly, and considering he has an idol, it's gonna make him more compelled to use it that night. Meanwhile, Noonan, still not willing to give up, tries to use the conversation she has with AJ against him to turn some of his allies on him, which they do take into consideration. So then we finally go to Tribal, where after feeling sketched out enough, Polly does play his idol for himself, but it also spooked AJ to play his idol too. So now that both men are safe, they nullify all the votes that are cast against them, and Noonan, being the only one vulnerable with votes against her, is eliminated. Afterwards, the tribe head back to camp, and AJ is being confronted a lot by his allies because the idol that he played was not shared with them, especially Karen, who was believing he was her ally, is losing some trust with him, which all of this is working out for Polly's benefit since he is on the bottom. So if AJ now being in the spotlight, it can help him squeeze on by. Then on Brawn 2.0, Jesse, who seems to be leading the ex-Brawn pack, want to form a mega alliance with all the members of the tribe, which sounds stupid since if they lose, then they'll have to lose one. But this idea from Jesse is massively disapproved by Kate and Morgan, who just look at him as a dictator who has such overconfidence with his game positioning. So they think of working with Laura and Zara to take a shot at Jesse. So then it's time for immunity, where it's all about endurance, and shockingly, it lasts so quickly as Brawn 2.0 seemingly just drops like that. And now they are going to be the tribe going to tribal. But once they return to camp, Jesse gathers the ex-Brawn together, and he thinks they should be voting out Laura, which is what the plan seemingly is. However, Kate and Morgan do potentially seem like they're gonna flip on Jesse and side with Zara and Laura. Jesse and Ben notice how the girls are seemingly tight, and they start to pull in Miles to be a number for them. Then minutes before tribal, Laura finds an advantage near the water well, and then her discovery is caught by Zara, who learns about the advantage with Laura and is more frustrated by it than excited. And we'll know why when they go to tribal, as Zara continues goading Laura into complying how she wants the advantage to be played, which pretty much was peer pressuring her to the point where she has to finally expose that the advantage she found was a clue that the person who was voted out would not be eliminated, instead would swap over to the Brawn 2.0 tribe. Which for this twist itself, it was basically where Laura knew that she was on the chopping block and was willing to anonymously get herself voted out with the knowledge of this twist being in play. But when Zara learned about it, she knew it was damning for her game, so she needed the details of it exposed to the whole tribe so they would know in advance. And that would work out for her, as when the tribe goes to vote, the person that they vote to swap is Zara, and she switches over to the Brawn buff and makes her way there. Now with Zara joining Brawn 2.0, she has settled herself well, with her insulating with the ex-brains, creating a bond with AJ, and him informing her on the dynamics of the tribe. Then back to Brawn 2.0, Laura is upset with how Zara peer pressured her into revealing the advantage, demonizing her tactics, which has turned everyone on the tribe against her as well, planning for Zara to be the target coming into the merge. Meanwhile, Miles, who's been hanging on by a thread, finally finds a hidden immunity idol. Then we go to reward, where it's another duel challenge, during which Kaylin wrestles a little too hard with Petey's arm and hurting it in the process. So Petey is temporarily escorted away for medical attention, while the challenge continues and Brawn 2.0 win, so they get a reward of a spaghetti feast, where it's the usual twist where only one person at a time goes to feast on the food. And what this is, it's blatantly known that there's going to be an advantage involved too. So while everyone is digging and just eating at the same time, they haven't found any luck, aside from Miles, who does find a clue, and after reading it more, he finds the advantage under the shelter, and the twist is well known to be the knowledge's power. Then on Brawn 2.0, some of the ex-brains are really wary of AJ's gameplay. Then Logan goes and finds a hidden immunity idol in front of Kaylin and Karen. So then we get to immunity, where Petey comes back from medical with now a cast around his arm, but he is okay to continue and he chooses to stay. And Brawn 2.0 lose, so they are back at camp, and it seems like the consensus vote off is Polly. Polly himself knows his life is on the line, so he tries to search for cracks within the majority lines to try and steer the votes against AJ. Meanwhile, AJ recognizes how obvious the vote is, and worrying that Polly is in possession of an idol that could backfire the plan on him, he decides that he wants to make a move against Logan. So then they go to tribal, and it turns out all the scrambling was just for nothing, because this tribal council is going to be cancelled, because JLP reveals to them that a player from Brawn 2.0, Ben, has unexpectedly departed the game. Then the next day, the two tribes come together at a reward challenge where JLP announces that it's time to merge, and so now they're merged in one tribe, and now they compete in their first individual reward challenge where Kate wins and she takes a few players with her on a cocktail reward. Meanwhile, we see how AJ is keen to catch a lot of heat from the likes of like Logan and Laura, and even like some of the Brawn members who are just sketched out by him. But fortunately for him, he's got a backing with his alliance with Miles, who they have now create a foundational alliance that can take them far. While Laura and Logan, although they're expressing their hate for AJ, they're also exasperated with Zara because of Laura's advantage situation. So then they compete in immunity, and it comes down to Jesse and Logan, where Logan wins immunity. So for the scrambling, Jesse assembles the Brawn together and is keen on getting out Zara, just like what he planned for in the previous episode. But he is oblivious that Kate and Morgan had already been planned to flip against him and are still staying true to that coming into this vote, and that favors the Brains as well, as they're now planning to vote for Jesse too. However, with the Jesse move now being brought to AJ's attention, he has his personal preference of getting rid of Polly because he's skated on by many tribals. So he suggests to his fellow Brains to vote for him, but instead they spin it around and decide to use Polly as a split vote. So now with this, he now decides to start flipping over some of the OG Brawn onto the plan in the likes of the established duo in PD and Kristen, who are very well receptive to his idea. So after this flip-floppy scrambly, we go to Tribal finally, and we see that the two split vote targets are the only ones voting for Zara, where JLP counts up to 5 votes each for Jesse and Polly, and the last deciding vote ends up sending home Jesse, which is so much to Polly's relief. So afterwards, Polly is demoralized seeing that his name came up quite a bit in the previous vote, and after his observation on the dynamics, he recognizes everyone else has got a pair but himself. Which, I mean, Kaylin doesn't have one either, which for some reason wasn't brought up. But anyways, Polly's on the outs. After that, Kaylin tells AJ about Logan's idol, which he shares his information with Miles, and they now are in the know of 2 idols, one being Kristen's, which is obviously public, and then Logan's. And this also favors Miles, where he finally tells AJ about his knowledge is power advantage, where he can steal someone's idol. So this possesses him a lot of power coming into this next round. Next, after a battle of endurance, Kaylin comes out on top and wins immunity. So it looks like it's going to be an easy vote for Polly to go, which easy votes are not always going to be the case. And we see here Laura suggesting to sway the votes onto PD instead, so that way she can pull in Kristen a lot closer. Someone like Miles approves of this plan. However, when Laura tries to get Logan on board, she highly disapproves of it, expressing her agitation of being dictated instead of having a lead in the vote. So Laura chooses to back out of the plan and informs Miles about it, which irritates him because of Logan's stubbornness to budge, which is now leading to a boring Polly vote off. But Miles knows that he entered Survivor not willing to play a boring game, so he definitely has something up his sleeve coming into Tribal. And when we get there, Miles plays his knowledge is power advantage, and he steals Kristen's idol. And after her votes, he makes another brutal move by playing Kristen's idol onto Polly, which puzzles everyone who voted for him. So every vote for Polly is nullified, and 3 votes against PD sends him home. Coming back to camp, the whole tribe is annoyed by Miles and AJ's move to save Polly, which the man himself is in such relief and owes it a lot to Miles. But obviously, AJ and Miles are pretty much big targets that Logan is trying to push for. Meanwhile, AJ, Miles, and Kaylin chat a bit, and they propose to reinstate the Graduates Alliance, bringing back Zara and Karin in their grouping, which Zara is up for it, while Karin is a bit more iffy about it because of AJ. So then at reward, the blue team wins an American feast, and while they go munch on their food, Miles spills out that he knows Logan is in possession of an idol, which is getting more people to jump on board with his pack to target Logan and Laura. Meanwhile at camp, Logan is seeking vengeance against AJ and Miles and tries to rally the numbers against them, but Zara, who's obviously a part of the Graduates, quickly spills it out to AJ, which keeps them in full content on taking out one of Laura or Logan. At immunity, Kaylin wins his second one in a row. So now the plan is to try and get Logan out, or at least flush her idol and vote Laura as a backup. Meanwhile, Logan and Laura have their own plan to split votes between AJ and Miles to take one of them out. But as the scrambling continues, we see that they're the ones that are having less of the power compared to Miles and AJ. Then we get back with Karin, who obviously continues to express her hesitancy with AJ and decides that she might try and get Logan to save herself with her idol. And at Tribal, Karin whispers to Logan to play her idol, and she complies and do so, nullifying the majority votes against her. However, her and Laura's votes weren't enough to idle out AJ, and the split votes on Laura sent her home instead. Getting back to camp, some players saw through Karin's antics, which is definitely where they're losing some trust with her. Logan is now all alone in this game, and some people do commiserate with her position now. Then we have a conversation between Miles and Karin, where the latter lists some targets she has on her mind in Morgan and Kate, because they are a duo. Plus, it can help dwindle some of AJ's numbers too. Meanwhile, AJ himself and Kaylin are discussing about taking Karen out next. Then the players participate in the Survivor auction, where they can auction for some food or other sort of rewards. And some of them food are really good, which obviously appeals to me when I think about food. But notably, we have Kate earning an advantage where she can steal someone's food, which that's very brutal. And she steals Kristen's lasagna and beer. And then we have Logan, who gets a phone call at home, which was good timing for her, especially how solemn she was earlier that day. Afterwards, we get more game talk with AJ, this time talking with Kate and Morgan, where he works with them to get rid of Karen, and they go chat with Miles for his approval, which in conventional, Miles wouldn't prefer Karen to go since he thinks she's an easy beat at the end. The players face off in another individual immunity where Kate wins, which is much to Karen's predicament, forcing her hand to target Kate's ally Morgan now, which she pushes for. But AJ and Miles have a plan of their own, where they suggest split votes between Polly and Logan, with Logan being the preferred boot. But once AJ informs the likes of Zara and Karen about the plan, everything just goes awry and there's just so many confusion about where the vote is going, which this is becoming repetitive with this Australian Survivor scrambling. But then at Tribal, JLB tells them in advance that they're not voting someone out, they're going to be splitting the tribe into two tribes in Bounty and Baron, which will operate until the next immunity challenge, where the players who are in the Baron tribe will have to face in dire shape of a tribe camp, while the Bounty tribe will stay at the current camp and will get an advantage in the next immunity challenge. And whichever tribe wins immunity, the losing tribe are the only ones vulnerable for the next vote. But to determine these tribes, they go through a series of stages where it first starts off with Kate, the immunity winner, where she takes Morgan with her to join the Bounty tribe. Then they follow up with a vote where the two highest vote getters will go to Baron, and unfortunately, Polly and Logan get the highest votes and will be on Baron. Then finally, a rock draw will determine the last few players on the tribe that they're joining. And after the draw, the last three members of Baron are Miles, Kaylin, and Kristen, while the remaining items are on Bounty. So there you go, the tribes have been divided. So we begin with the Bounty tribe, who are just enjoying their luxury feast, and the girls want to take a shot at Miles, and they try reeling in AJ on the plan, which he openly accepts, which is his way of putting some distance with Miles. Then on the Baron tribe, we have Polly lamenting on his misfortunes in this game, where we actually get a montage of it, which is really unfortunate. So then the four players but Miles chat about the potential vote if their group loses immunity, and they concept the plan to pitch Miles as the target. With now both groups coming for him, this is not looking good for him, but he still has the idol, so we'll see about that. The two tribes now face off in the immunity, with Bounty getting an advantage, which pays off for them, and the Baron tribe just loses, so now the members of that tribe are vulnerable for the next vote. So for the strategy talk leading up to Tribal, the whole plan is to drop the votes on Miles, but split some on Polly in the case of an idol. And that's when AJ decides to spill to Miles that he's on the chopping block, which although he wants to create some separation with Miles, he still wants him in the game as a shield, and also because he's an ally of his. So now Miles is in the know that he's in trouble and is dead set on playing his idol that night. But he has a plan of his own. He wants to try and target Kristen, labeling her as the most insulated player of the tribe. And he tries to bring in Logan and Polly in the vote, but there are some hesitancies with both of them, where Polly and Logan both plan to go after each other in the upcoming vote, with Logan in particular spilling to Kristen that she was Miles' target. So for the up team type, with this wild scrambling, the players now go cast their votes, and Miles uses his idol on himself and negates 5 votes against him, and then the remaining votes are spread among Logan, Kristen, and Polly, but unfortunately, Polly gets the next highest votes, and that's where his survivor journey tragically ends. Now the following night, everyone is just stunned at Miles scraped down by another tribal thanks to an idol play. And then the next day, Kaylin and Miles talk where they pretty much resign to that the Graduates Alliance is over and Karen is the main reason for it, so now they want to get rid of her next. Karen has a new plan of her own, and that is getting rid of Kate. So she gets Zara to share a plan, which is almost immediately told back to Kate by AJ, and they are now cementing the plan to get Karen next. So then it's reward, where they some reason compete in pairs despite it being at 9, which Logan is the one who drew out. And the challenge ends with Kristen and AJ winning the reward and inviting Kaylin and Logan to join with them, which the four feast on, and then they have a strategy talk outlining their plan to get rid of Karen, but to split some votes on Zara. And they bring Kate and Morgan on the plan too, so that makes a solid 6 to execute this move. So next up, another immunity is up for grabs, and Kaylin grabs it yet again. So we have this new pack pretty much locking in the plan to vote between Karen and Zara. But we do see some cracks within this pack where Kristen believes for her own game it's better to have Kaz around than Zara, and she could flip her one vote to make Zara be the boot. Then we see Miles being pulled into the plan, not being 100% informed on who is the boot, but is just told to vote for Zara. And then the final most important conversation, which is between Kristen and Karen, and a foreman tells her that she's part of a split vote plan, which puzzles her, and she's inclined to spark some fireworks at Tribal, and whoa she does, where she straight up calls over Logan, Zara, Kristen, and Kaylin to huddle together for a brief strategy talk where she begs them to vote for Miles, which instead of benefiting her, this in turn just annihilated all of her possibilities of surviving this round, because after the vote initiates, despite her voting for her number one in Zara, some of the split votes on Zara in the likes of Miles and Kristen flip to vote for her, which devastatingly sends her out. Post-Tribal, Logan openly takes ownership of the move, and AJ uses it to his benefit to paint a bigger target on Logan. Next morning, Kristen does some damage control with AJ because she was exposed to be the one telling Kaz about the plan, so she wants to make it up for her essential betrayal. And we have Zara willingly uniting the graduates back together, so now she, Kaylin, AJ, and Miles are aligned again. An IKEA reward is offered for the challenge winner, and Kristen takes that win and invites Morgan and Logan to join her as well. And while spending some time on this luxury reward, they do create such a strong bond and strategize for the upcoming vote, suggesting Zara to be on the top of their hit list. While at camp, Zara and AJ solidified their graduates alliance again, and now dub it the postgraduates. And for their hit list, first would be Logan because she's the biggest threat, and then probably Kristen because AJ is able to see right through her game. And now Miles, being the legendary player he is, finds his fourth idol. Wow. Individual immunity is on the line again, and Kaylin picks it up for the fourth time. So then we get this scrambling where the postgraduates are locked in on getting Logan out, while Logan's side pulling Kate as the fourth so they could vote out Zara. So now it's pretty much a 4-4 split at the moment. And if they do end up deadlocked, then it's going to lead to the rock draw, which everyone fears. But seriously, AU Survivor has never done a rock draw that eliminated someone. But we'll see if it happens here. So for this tribal council, the votes are indeed tied 4-4 between Zara and Logan, and the revote is no big surprise. So we go to the last stage where it's the deliberation, and both Zara and Logan make their pitches. And after some thinking about the position that everyone will be in with the rock draw, Logan decides to just lay down her sword and allow her side to vote her out as well. So with that, Logan sacrifices herself and is sent out. So now Logan's gone, the 3 remaining Brawn women are now on the bottom, while the postgraduates are out on top, with now their next move is to go after Kristen. However, their only worry is that there is an idol in play. Kristen knows she's in an interesting spot and could be the next to go, but she's banking on hope that she can get Zara to flip on the boys. So she chats with Zara and tries to get her mind opened up about turning on them, which Zara expresses that she's not opposed to it, but needs to weigh in her options on whether it's good for her game long term. Then everyone endures in a very intense endurance challenge for immunity. It comes down to Kristen and Kaylin, but the compete himself maintains his title and wins his 5th immunity. So the postgraduates, although they have a minor debate on how they're going to display their votes, they ultimately come to the conclusion to unanimously put all their votes on Kristen. Meanwhile, the aforementioned herself tries to chat with Zara again to get her to flip and vote out one of the boys. She initially suggests AJ, which Zara does express her qualms with. Then Kristen suggests Miles instead, which Zara is definitely more up for. So she's met with this big dilemma on whether she turns on Miles or stays on the postgraduate side and have a simple Kristen vote off. So at Tribal, the Brawn girls do whisper to each other on their opinions of whether Zara is going to flip or not, which some of them are not confident with. And yep, they were correct, as the votes are casted. Zara stuck with the postgraduates, and in a 4-3 vote, Kristen is voted out. So now the duo of Kate and Morgan are the ones on the bottom, but they do have some merit of staying because Kaylin, who's won the most immunities, is starting to have a target on his back, and someone like Miles is willing to strike on him the minute that he's vulnerable, so he's gotta watch out. So right away, they go to an immunity challenge, and it is a tight race for Kaylin, who is really desperate to win, and he's able to pull out his 6th immunity win, and one that was pretty pivotal to him too. So now with Kaylin out of the picture, the postgraduates are back to sticking together, where some of them are hellbent on getting rid of Kate due to her threat level, but AJ has his own idea of wanting Morgan out instead. But his allies disagree with him, so he makes a very bold attempt of trying to get Kate to flip on Morgan, which she gets emotional about when she hears of this. So as she departs, Kaylin joins AJ where the latter informs him that Miles was coming after him in this scenario where he didn't have immunity, which now Kaylin is alerted of Miles. So back with Kate and Morgan, obviously she tells her best friend about what she was informed by and vows to never vote for her at all. Morgan, same thing. So now together, they push for Miles again and this time tries to flip Kaylin over so that they can officially exterminate Miles from the game. So then they go to Tribal, where JLT tells them that there is a twist, but someone is still going home, which thank God. But the twist is that there's another immunity challenge awaiting for another individual to win immunity. So everyone aside from Kaylin competes, and Kate is the one that won that pivotal immunity that she needed. But unfortunately, sealing her best friend Morgan's fate as the postgraduates vote together to send out Morgan, and she is devastatingly sent home. And now that her best friend's gone, Kate is the last Brawn standing and is clearly a dead man walking, and so we thought. As we see Miles chat with Zara, and he talks about the possibility of cutting AJ, and it just requires him and Zara's votes to do so, which is a pretty cutthroat idea that he concepted. However, AJ does see right through Miles' antics, sensing something was off with his vibes, so he decides to warn Kaylin about Miles' attempted striking at him if he was not immune. And he also alerts him that Miles is in possession of a fourth idol too. Next, individual immunity is back up for grabs, and the challenge is more of an equalizer, and finally, Kaylin isn't the one that wins. Instead, it's Zara. So next, we go into a wild sequence leading up to a Tribal, where we start off with Miles solidifying his plan to take his buddy AJ out, but he wants to get Kate to vote for Kaylin because it's the first time since he's been vulnerable. And then we see AJ and Kaylin have a plan of their own where they want to split votes between Kate and Miles. So the planning of the votes are pretty split among all the people that are vulnerable, which is crazy to think about with what the players are planning to do. But to culminate all of this mess, Zara is facing a dilemma on whether she wants to side with Miles to take out AJ or just stick with the flow and get rid of Kate, especially since she looks at Kate as a challenge threat later on. So now we guide ourselves into a very insane Tribal where Miles plays his idol on himself because obviously last time, and he nullifies Kaylin's vote against him. Then we see the next vote split among AJ, Kate, and Kaylin's, with Zara's vote being the decider, and she ends up voting out Kate. And all the Brawns have now been exterminated. And now Miles' plan blows up in his face, with Zara taking credit for solely getting Kate out. And now from this point on, Miles is target number 1. But obviously, immunity is still up for grabs, so players do need to work out the scenario if that were to happen, in which we see AJ and Zara chat about it, and AJ acknowledges that he won't be down to write down Kaylin's name, which further develops their relationship and establishes their unbreakable bond, which can be damning for Zara in the case that Miles wins immunity. And so here we go with the challenge, and guess what? Miles wins immunity. And with that, Zara's chances isn't looking great, especially knowing AJ and Kaylin won't vote for each other, so with 2 votes locked against her, her only hope is getting Miles to vote with her so she can compete in fire, which in this case, her scenario would be competing against AJ. But she does try to make some pitches to AJ, but he's just not budging, and same thing for Kaylin. So while Miles is feeling safe, he's also weighing out his options on the best choice to move forward with. And previously before the immunity challenge, Kaylin told him that he would be willing to take him to the end. So in grading that line in his head, he could go for an easy flow and get rid of Zara so that way he can ensure himself a final 2 spot if Kaylin won the final immunity. So he's got another option in mind. So the final 4 vote, and Miles does opt to side with Kaylin and AJ's side of things, leading to Zara's vote out and sending her to the jury. And now we reach the home stretch where the final 3 face off in the last immunity challenge, where Kaylin comes out on top and wins his 7th immunity, guaranteeing his final 2 spot. So now he has to make a decision to pick between Miles or AJ to vote out. And we know that he has established 2 final 2 deals with them, so it's a really tough choice, and he even touches upon it as he celebrates his victory. And so the players go straight to Tribal, and Kaylin still remains undecisive, and it gets to the point where the Dreammen are going to have to huddle in private to drive him away from the conscience he's having and think thoroughly on his best move to guarantee him a winning chance. So after this, Kaylin makes his deciding vote, and he eliminates AJ, which is really what blindsided the jury the most. So now we've got a final 2 between Miles and Kaylin. What an interesting event of 2 polar opposite players, where Miles is more of the brains, and Kaylin played mostly on the Brawn side, even though he was on the brains tribe. So now they make it to the final tribal council and pitch to the jury their games. And we see that both men do get a lot of critiques from the jury about their games not being completely flawless and contradicting some of their claims they are making in their pitches. But after all this, the jury now make their votes for the winner. And by a near unanimous vote, the winner of Brains vs. Brawn 2 is Miles. So congrats to him for being sole survivor. And with that, that concludes the review of the season. And now for my final thoughts on it, I think it's an okay season. Definitely not like the Titans vs. Rebels or AU Heroes vs. Villains level. And it definitely wasn't helped by the fact that the back half of the season played out very underwhelmingly with some easy votes taking place, which is just not fun to watch. So I shall say the post-merge was pretty so-so. The pre-merge though was definitely decent, was very chaotic and intense at points, but definitely wasn't giving me that hype in comparison to the last season where I definitely had more like investment into it just because it had a well-established storyline that kept me hooked along for the ride, while this season didn't really have like a solid storyline to really stay engaged with, which is definitely what harmed the pacing of the season. So in a way, I would come out of the season kind of feeling more mid on it. So I personally look at it as on a more finer side of things, just not giving me much of that energy that I wish it could have. So yeah, that is my overall thoughts on this season. Now let's get into that semi-ranking that I promised to do. So here, I'm going to be giving like an award to who I think was the best player this season and who is the worst player. So let's start off on the positive side with who I think is the best player. And after this finale, although this player was very passive at points, I still believe that they managed their social skills really the best and avoided being a prime target despite the amount of times that they were actively putting it on their back. And that person is Kalen, which although Miles did win, I do think his journey along the way was just more rocky and he needed to save himself more often than Kalen did. While Kalen did actively win so much immunities, which in general, beasting your way with immunities just put a target on your back, he somehow showed his aptitude with his social skills that avoided him getting in the boot despite times that he would be vulnerable despite the record-breaking immunities he's had, which that alone is very impressive with how he even manages his positioning despite those typical threat levels being very blatant to the players. And just in general, Kalen also knows how to micromanage his trust with a lot of people, like when Logan told him about her idol and he would eventually spill it out to AJ and Miles and not get caught about it, which goes to show his abilities to build such strong trust with people. So although he did end up losing at the end for making a questionable choice of who he took, I personally do like how he avoided being in the firing line despite the immunity wins, actively putting himself into that position. And then for the worst player of the season, I think it might be a wild choice that I'm going to make, but it really came down to the first two boots of the Brains tribe, so it was Indy or Kent, and I'm going to boldly say Kent is the worst player of the season, just because I felt that he was fodder for an easy boot, even if he didn't actively sabotage himself during the previous tribal. And in comparison to Indy, although she did actively blow up her position right away, the Covenant Alliance was still willing to pull her in as a number before she did so, while Ken pretty much had like nobody and no one was pulling him in any sort of plan. Really the only plan that he knows was by himself, which is targeting Miles, and we know that plan was going nowhere. So in my opinion, this guy literally is the worst player. So that's that. And now after all this, I can use this time to reflect on the preseason video that I made months back, where I reacted to the season preview and gave my predictions on what the season may entail and how I think certain players shown were going to play. And I was pretty so-so. And yes, Miles was in that promo, and I was sort of right that he was going to have a journey. But obviously, he's coming out of the season as the winner, so he proved me wrong, and he had more than just a journey on this season. He had a winning story, too. But yeah, most of my predictions weren't lived up to, and this all sums up my coverage on the season. A middling season that had very abysmal editing and just some very lackluster pacing, which is definitely a big negative to the season. But it does have some good moments and decent casting choices that propels it a bit. So yeah, I appreciate all of you tuning in to me to cover on this season, and I will see you guys later in another video. AU vs. the World is coming soon this summer. Can't wait to watch it.